With Lindy Waters III becoming a member of the Detroit Pistons, you've probably heard some mention online of the Detroit Pistons curse. Specifically, a curse that says any Native American basketball player that joins the Detroit Pistons will die in their 30s due to some drowning accident. Is this true? Is this a curse, a conspiracy, or just coincidence? Well, stick around as we talk about the story and history of this curse to see if Lindy Waters needs to be afraid of the water. Haha. On February 11th, 2025, Lindy Waters III made his debut as a member of the Detroit Pistons, and in doing so, became the fourth Native American to play for the team. The Kiowa American is one of the several natives to have played in the NBA, joining a decorated list that also includes former All-Stars and champions such as John Starks, Aaron Gordon, and Kyrie Irving, to name a few. For professional athletes, the term legacy is often connected with achievements of high esteem, whether it be the fan favorite or greatest of all time. However, the legacy of Native Americans playing for the Detroit Pistons is an ominous one. That is because every Native American who has played for the Detroit Pistons has suffered tragic water-related deaths. So let's back up and give some history. The first Native American to play for the Detroit Pistons was actually the first to play in the NBA. Phil Jordan of Northern California showed an athletic prowess for basketball at an early age. Of Waulaki and non-Waulaki descent, his athleticism earned Jordan an athletic scholarship to Whitworth College, now Whitworth University, in Spokane, Washington. Ironically, Jordan's mom was over 6 feet tall, but her maiden name was Short. On the court, Phil Jordan was ambidextrous and could score at will with either hand. He was given the nickname The Flash for how quickly he could move through the other team's defense. Jordan made his professional debut after being drafted by the New York Knicks in the 1956 season. Over the course of his 7-year career, which included stints with the St. Louis Hawks, the Cincinnati Royals, and the Detroit Pistons, he averaged nearly 11 points and 9 rebounds per game, playing alongside legends like Oscar Robertson and Lenny Wilkins, and going toe-to-toe against Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. If you know nothing about basketball, just imagine that those names mean something to you. Infamously, Jordan is best remembered for a game he didn't even show up for. On March the 2nd of 1962, the Philadelphia Warriors beat the New York Knicks 169 to 147. I guess both teams just decided that day that defense was optional. History was made that day as Wilt Chamberlain, one of the all-time greats, set the single-game scoring record with a 100-point performance. Phil Jordan, who would normally have been responsible for guarding Wilt, did not play. According to American author and journalist Gary Pomerantz, Jordan was in no condition to suit up due to him spending the previous day drinking a whole case of beer while celebrating his teammate Sam Stith, whose wife was delivering their first child. Jordan later went out that evening with another teammate, Donnie Butcher. Now, Pomerantz's account was disputed by fellow Knicks player Willie Naults, stating that Jordan's absence was because of illness. Now, regardless of the conflicting accounts, Jordan was known as a drinker and partier during his tenure as a professional athlete. Jordan played his last NBA game on April the 7th, 1963, and retired after the season. He moved to Tacoma, Washington, and lived there until he tragically lost his life 2 years later. In June of 1965, Jordan fell into the Pile Up River after his raft broke apart. His 3 raft mates were able to swim to safety, but the 6'10" Jordan did not. It took nearly a month for authorities to find his body. Now, it's unclear why the men were out on the water at 10 p.m., but it's reported that Jordan was testing the raft before the accident occurred. His family's version of events was that it happened in preparation for a race that he would do annually. According to his niece, Lisa Jordan, quote, "Something happened to the raft and he didn't make it to shore." On January the 5th of 2025, Phil Jordan was posthumously honored by the Golden State Warriors with the Golden State Impact Award, which recognizes individuals who have made a significant impact to their communities or have broken barriers in their respective fields. Despite his untimely death and off-court challenges, Jordan's legacy will be remembered as being a trailblazer for his community. Now, on its own, the story is simply a tragedy that happened to a seasoned athlete. But what's odd is the similar events that would happen later. The second native player for the Detroit Pistons was born Lloyd Leslie Dove Jr. on August 16, 1945, Given the nickname Sonny, his mother was of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, so by tradition, her children belonged to the tribe as well. After moving to the mecca of basketball, New York City, Dove picked up the sport and developed an incredible jump shot, and always found a way to the basket, which made him a highly skilled rebounder. As a result, this 6'7" forward earned a full basketball scholarship to St. John's University in Queens, which would become a thematic haven for Dove throughout his life. Dove was known by his teammates for always laughing and being full of life, and he played 3 seasons at St. John's, averaging 19 points per game. After 3 seasons, Dove went to the NBA draft and was selected as the 4th overall pick in 1967 by, you guessed it, the Detroit Pistons. Dove spent 2 unproductive seasons in Detroit, averaging less than 5 points per game, before joining the New York Nets of the ABA in 1969, which at the time was a rival league of sports to the NBA. The fact that you didn't know what that was until I had to tell you shows how that rivalry went. The change of scenery and returning to his home city proved beneficial for Dove, which led him to a pair of successful seasons averaging nearly 15 points per game. And during the 70-71 season, Dove played alongside future basketball legend Rick Barry, as well as reunited with his former coach from St. John's, Lou Carnesecca. Unfortunately, the 1971 season would be Dove's last, and he would never play in the NBA again when the ABA merged in 1976. That's because in 1972, a bicycle accident shattered Dove's leg, ending his career as a professional basketball player. He needed a career change, but was 30 credits short of a college degree, so Dove returned to the place where he excelled, St. John's. He eventually graduated with a bachelor's in communications. After graduating, Dove worked in sports radio as a broadcaster, and in the 1980s, he was the color commentator for St. John's basketball games. However, the gig didn't pay much, so to supplement his income, he also worked a second job as a taxi cab driver. When his former coach, Carnesecca, found out about Dove's part-time gig, he wasn't thrilled, especially since Dove was still in the limelight and somewhat of a public figure. I mean, imagine if like LeBron James broke his leg on a motorcycle and then he was your Uber driver one day. You'd probably feel bad for the guy. I mean, granted, LeBron has enough money now, I'm sure that he wouldn't have to do that, but you get my point. So Dove wanted the taxi cab thing to be temporary, but as he was waiting for this opportunity, he still had responsibilities. And despite being separated from his wife, he wanted to be a good father to his daughter, Zaina, who was living with him at the time. So credit where it's due, despite where Dove came from, he didn't think himself too good to work a job to support his daughter. Dove seemed to fall into the trap that a lot of professional sports players did at the time, where they either spent all of their salary or lent it to family members, and to combat this, Dove would often advise high school students to question college recruiters about their education, hoping that they would avoid the same fiscal woes that befell him. So it seems that Dove wasn't only a great athlete, but a stand-up guy, which makes what happened to him all the more tragic. Dove's final game as a radio broadcaster was for St. John's victory over Big East Conference rival Georgetown on Wednesday, February the 9th. On a snowy Valentine's night in 1983, 37-year-old Dove drove his cab onto the Hamilton Avenue Bridge headed west towards the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. This bridge is one of New York City's 24 movable bridges, and this one in particular is the first canal crossing north of the Gowanus Bay. That evening, the drawbridge was partially open to let a vessel pass through, and due to the dangerous road conditions, the Department of Transportation sent a bridge attendant with a lantern to alert motorists that the bridge was open. Another important reason for the attendant's presence was due to the fact that the bridge's protective gate was inoperable because of a power failure that caused the gate to be out of order for a couple days. This combination of factors led to tragedy, as around 9:45 p.m., Dove tried to apply his brakes when he realized the drawbridge was raised, but it was too late. He skidded off the bridge and fell 25 feet into the canal's 10 feet of water. Unfortunately, Dove did not see the bridge attendant, who had to jump out of the way. And I mean, you can't really blame him. It's 1983 and the dude has a lantern. Like, where did he even find a lantern? We had television, like LED lights and microwaves, and the guy found like an oil lantern? Was he on a horse? When the first police units arrived on the scene, they saw bubbles in the canal and notified emergency service divers, who pulled Dove from the water 30 minutes after the crash. He was later pronounced dead around 3 a.m. at Long Island College Hospital. Dove's daughter Xana and his estranged wife Patricia, from whom he was separated, filed a $1 million damage suit against New York City in compensation and punitive damage, but ultimately settled for $750,000. And yes, if the city of New York said it was okay for that guy to have a lantern, I would sue too. Dove was honored posthumously by his alma mater and inducted into the St. John's Athletics Hall of Fame, the New York City Basketball Hall of Fame, and St. Francis Prep Ring of Honor, cementing his legacy as one of the city's best homegrown talents. As with anything, once is an occurrence, twice is a coincidence, but 3 times is a pattern, which leads us on to our next tragedy. The most recent Native American to play for the Detroit Pistons is arguably the most successful and well-known due to the fact that he won a coveted NBA championship with the Chicago Bulls, playing alongside Hall of Famers Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman. However, after retiring from the NBA, he was never seen again. Bison Dele, born Brian Carson Williams, was the second son of Patricia Phillips and singer Eugene Williams Jr. of the American R&B soul music group The Platters. Naturally, his first passion was music, as you can imagine, playing instruments like the violin and trumpet. Williams initially favored track and field until a growth spurt in high school at Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas pushed him towards basketball. He played 1 year at the University of Maryland before transferring to the University of Arizona, where he averaged 12 points per game. This 6'11" center declared for the draft after his junior year and was selected by the Orlando Magic as a 10th pick in the first round. Williams had an unspectacular start as a professional basketball player. He saw limited playing time in Orlando, where he may have started to realize he didn't love the game as much as he thought he did. His teammate Tom Talbert once saw Williams crying while reading a biography of Miles Davis. Upon asking why he was crying, Williams told Talbert that he just wished to have the same passion for basketball that Miles had for music. Williams' emotional state might have been an early indication of issues with his mental health. The Magic sidelined Williams because of clinical depression, and in October of 1992, he attempted suicide by nearly overdosing on sleeping pills. Although he was not committed to a hospital, Williams admitted that he felt drugged up in the following days. Prior to the incident, Williams had suffered from fainting spells and even collapsed during practice while guarding future star Shaquille O'Neal, which prompted the team to take him off the active roster. Williams, not Shaquille. On his way to a workout, the Magic center blacked out and crashed his car into a concrete column of an overpass. Luckily, Williams was not injured. After undergoing a series of neurological and cardiological tests, the team's medical staff did not find any serious heart problems. Being such a highly touted prospect, Williams took this bizarre physical reaction personally, unable to find reason to why he was having these setbacks. The team tried their best to help Williams cope, but after 2 seasons, their relationship had run its course. He joined the Denver Nuggets in the 93-94 season and played a career-high 80 games. Averaging 8 points a game, he stayed with the team for another season before joining the Los Angeles Clippers in 1995. It seemed like his career was progressing in the way one might hope, as he averaged nearly 16 points per game, easily the best season of his career thus far. Unfortunately, Williams would end up sitting out most of the following season due to a contract dispute. See, it doesn't matter if you're in movie making or sports or writing or whatever, the attorneys will always get you. This free-spirited artist trapped in an NBA player was best encapsulated by a story recounted by Pete Serrano, who was the Clippers' equipment manager at the time. One day, while the team had an off day in Dallas one afternoon, Williams called Serrano to meet him in the hotel lobby. When Serrano got there, he saw a helicopter in the parking lot, as well as another Clipper, Mark Seeley, who Williams had convinced to join him for a ride. The 3 of them, including the pilot, spent nearly 5 hours in the air over Texas. Williams was not the type of person to spend the day in his hotel room. He had to get out and see things. It's such an interesting case because he was good at basketball and seemed to be adored by a lot of people while he was doing it, but it doesn't seem like his heart was always in it, that there were these greater passions for the world he wanted to come across, and it led to a lot of personal turmoil. Williams played basketball not out of love for the game, but out of necessity. Like most professional athletes, the role of provider was thrust onto him. His parents were divorced, and his older brother, born Kevin Williams, was constantly asking for money. As Williams' stint with the Clippers came to a close, another door opened. The Chicago Bulls needed a big man for their playoff run, and it was none other than Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time, who wanted Brian Williams to help the team get another championship. The Bulls signed Williams in April of '97, and he played the final 9 games of the regular season for them as a backup center behind Australian Luke Longley. Coming off the bench, Williams averaged 7 points per game, but was a force for them in rebounding and defense. In Game 5 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Atlantic Hawks, Williams scored 12 points and had 10 rebounds to help Chicago move into the Eastern Conference Finals. In the finals against the Utah Jazz, Williams was crucial in the minutes he played, serving as another big body to go up against league MVP Karl Malone. In Game 3, Williams scored 16 points and had 6 rebounds, and multiple Bulls players have cited Williams as a major factor behind them repeating as champions. Williams had finally reached the pinnacle of the sport, and as a result, he was offered a lucrative deal from the Detroit Pistons, $50 million for 7 years. As you could imagine, he took it. During his first year as a Piston, Williams posted career highs in points and rebounds. Although the team had a disappointing season, just missing the playoffs, things were looking good for Williams. Maybe he had finally found his passion for the game. Before the 1998 season, Williams did something that some athletes had done before and many had done after. He changed his name. Following in the footsteps of Cassius Clay, Lou Alcindor, and even Ron Artest, who respectively changed their names to Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Meta World Peace, Williams changed his name to Bison Dele to honor his Native American and African heritage. The Bison have been integral to the survivor and culture of many native tribes, not only for their food, but also shelter, clothing, tools, and spiritual significance, and Dele is a common surname in many African nations. The 1998 season was cut short due to a lockout, the third of 4 lockouts in the history of the NBA, and rather than a usual start date around October, the regular season began in February of '99. During the truncated regular season, Dele averaged over 10 points and 5 rebounds per game. The team made it to the playoffs, but lost in the first round to the Atlanta Hawks, where Dele had his hands full battling against Dikembe Mutombo. Now, Dele was extremely generous. Even before he was one of the team's highest paid players, he'd routinely give his playoff share, which by that time was more than $100,000, to ball boys or clubhouse attendants. Much like his former teammate Dennis Rodman, Dele seemed to relate better with the staff rather than the players themselves. When the Pistons' longtime secretary was leaving, Williams invited her to his home where he cooked her dinner and gave her $10,000. He even gave his coach, Doug Collins, and the team's executive Christmas gifts, which is unheard of. He gave each executive a pair of hand-knitted wool socks. I'm just kidding. He actually gave them handcrafted crystal sculptures formed into the Pistons' iconic horse logo, which was pretty cool and all, but you liked the socks better. Admit it. Despite these positive qualities, Dele also had some shall we say, interesting flashes of concerning behavior. The worst of these came when the team was returning home on a chartered flight during the 1999 season. As the flight was mid-air, Bison suddenly stood up, walked over to the front of the plane, and actually attempted to pull open the emergency exit hatch while flying at an altitude of over 30,000 feet. I don't even know how you would prepare for that kind of thing. You're on a flight with a bunch of your boys coming back from a game, and it's like, hey, Dele, where are you going? Dele? Alarming his teammates and team staff, several of them stood up to stop him before Dele suddenly stopped on his own. Allegedly, he told them he wanted to see something, which is a crazy way to describe ripping open the emergency exit door at 30,000 feet. But the pilot assured him that opening the door at that altitude was not advisable nor possible. According to past teammates, this wasn't the first time Dele had done something like this. He apparently had attempted something similar during his tenure with the Bulls. Now, we don't know explicitly what this was, if it was another plane with another emergency exit hatch, or if it was just something else that would potentially put other team members in danger. But regardless, this seemed to be self-destructive behavior. And while earlier he did things like consuming sleeping pills in an attempt to harm himself, now he was doing things risky enough to harm others as well. The 1999 NBA season would be the last time Dele played basketball ever again. There were probably many factors that led to his decision. Maybe it was the shortened season with all the time off showing him what a life removed from basketball might look like. I mean, after all, he had already proven to himself and the world that he had the talent and skills to reach the highest levels of the sport. With that, Dele informed the Pistons he was retiring. They asked him to stay. They needed his skills for their roster. They also owed him more than $30 million. Even if he didn't want to play, Dele could have easily hung around the team, phoned it in, and collected an easy paycheck with 82 games a year. I mean, he even could have faked or milked an injury, something that is somewhat of a problem in the NBA today, and been paid to sit on the bench and work out. But regardless, Dele told the team that he didn't want the money. True to his nature, Bison Dele wanted to explore and to experience everything life had to offer outside of basketball. And that he did. Dele was a part owner of a friend's water purification plant in Beirut, where he spent several months. In Pamplona, he ran with the Bulls, the real Bulls, not the basketball team this time. He wrote poetry while exploring the Australian outback and learned how to sail, eventually buying a catamaran in early 2000. Dele named the boat Hakuna Matata, a misspelling of the Swahili phrase that means no worries, something I'm sure everyone who watched Lion King is familiar with. The vessel was over 50 feet long, contained several bedrooms, a kitchen, and a living area that Dele furnished with a wraparound padded couch, beanbags, and a TV. He had a rotating cast of captains, mates, and travel partners as he sailed the South Pacific from Australia to Papua New Guinea. He'd finally found the peace of mind he had struggled to find throughout his career. However, what did seem to follow him from his days of basketball was a dark shadow that he could never escape: his older brother. Kevin Williams was born 3 years before Dele, and although he grew to be 6'8", asthma dashed any hopes of a life in athletics. While Dele was more sociable and naturally curious like his father, Kevin took on the traits of his mother, socially awkward and extremely sensitive. While Dele excelled as a collegiate and professional athlete, Kevin was not so blessed. He attended De Anza College in Cupertino, but never graduated. His asthma had gotten so severe, he had to take steroids. At times, the boy's mother, Patricia, had to take him to the ER. It was Dele who paid his older brother's medical bills and at times watched over him. However, Kevin was liable to spurts of anger and was known to be a heavy drinker. Dele would often hear from Kevin every couple of months with a new scheme to get rich. As much as Dele tried to distance himself from his family, his generosity always bore through. He bought his mother a house and spent around $80,000 to put her through school at UCLA. Twice, Dele gave his brother Kevin $50,000 as a gift. After his first season in the NBA, his father worked as a limo driver and lounge singer in Las Vegas while also battling a cocaine addiction. When Dele surprised his father with a $15,000 brand new Harley Davidson in his driveway, his father told him to give him cash next time. It is very tragic, and I have a lot of sympathy for Dele the more I learn about him. He seemed to be a kid that was really interested in the arts and music, but he was good at basketball, and honestly, there was more money in it. So he goes to do that, and he makes a lot of money, and he pays for his brother's hospital bills, he pays to put his mom through school, he pays to buy his dad nice things. But at every point, they want more and more. They get angry at him, and they just want cash instead of gifts or thoughtfulness. And Dele continues to support them because, it's his family. What else can he do? And then you see a lot of the self-destructive behaviors that Dele was showing to his teammates or to people in private, and it creates one big tragedy. For Kevin, his dream was going off the grid. Crushed with the comparison of his younger, more successful brother, he never felt comfortable in his own skin. He even looked like Dele, but standing at 270 pounds, he was a bigger, less handsome version. Like Dele, Kevin dealt with bouts of depression and drifted further from his family. He changed his name to Miles in honor of the famed jazz musician and used Dabbard as his surname, which came from a relative on his mother's side. So armed with this new identity, Miles Dabbard decided to heal any broken bonds he might have had with Dele and showed up in New Zealand in February of 2002 to surprise his younger brother. By this time, it had been 4 years since either of his parents had heard from him. When Dabbard showed up, Dele's girlfriend, Serena Carlin, was immediately dismayed. She called her best friend, who later said on the phone call that it was the first time she heard Serena speak negatively about another human being in the 17 years she had known her, if that tells you anything. So Dele makes a ton of money. No one seems appreciative of it. He goes to Australia and becomes a boat captain. Then after a couple of years, his brother shows up. can only go great from there, right? Speaking of Serena, let's talk about her for a minute. Serena Carlin met Dele in 1997 when she was 25 years old after returning from a group outing to a concert in Los Angeles. Dele's career in the NBA, where he played on 5 teams in a span of 8 years, made it difficult for them to have a relationship despite their strong connection. Serena hated her retail job and turned down offers to model. One night at a nightclub in LA, Prince, yes, the singer Prince, invited her over to his table. They eventually stayed in touch, and a few years later, the icon hired her as a personal assistant on his tour. She found the whole ordeal strange and left. As for Dele, he had a few flings with starlets, models, and singers, including Madonna, though he found her tiring, which is funny, as he would often hand the phone over to a friend whenever she called, who would listen to her talk for at least half an hour without stopping. That's just really funny. Imagine a basketball player being like, it's Madonna. Can you take it again, please? But it seems Dele was always smitten with Serena. And although she resisted Dele's advances, over time, her friends heard how she talked about him and knew she was smitten too. Dele and Serena saw the world the same way, and the fact that he was in the NBA was unimportant. In fact, Dele rarely spoke about basketball. Actually, the only thing he spoke about less than basketball was his family. So while playing basketball, Dele had met Serena, and the two of them were close, but both of their lives were way too sporadic to have any kind of real relationship. But after Dele gets out of basketball, he decides to give it a chance. Dele's purchase of the Hakuna Matata was in part a plan to finally seal the deal with Serena. He contacted her in 2001 and invited her to join him on his voyage around the world, which is incredibly romantic. Imagine you meet like this famous rich basketball player, and then you two stay in touch every now and then 3 years later, he's like, I have a ship in Australia. It's waiting for you. At first, Serena spent 2 weeks with Dele, which turned into 5. When she returned home, Dele called her a couple of times a week, asking her to come back. Not just for a few weeks, but to live with him. I'm not even Serena, and I'm starting to blush a little bit. This man's got the moves. With that, Serena packed her bags and flew out to meet Dele in New Zealand. She was thrilled to finally find something real. And what she wasn't thrilled about was the discovery that Dele's estranged older brother would be accompanying them on the boat. So with that set up, with all of these players in mind, that brings us to the inevitable tragedy you knew this story was coming to. Now, what we know from that point onwards is that on July 6, 2002, the Hakuna Matata left Tahiti for Hawaii with 4 people on board: Bison Dele, Serena Carlin, Miles Dabbard, and the boat's French captain, Bertrand Saldo. There were 4 satellite phone calls from the boat over the next 2 days, none of which were distress calls. On July the 8th, the satellite phones on the boat were turned off. Nobody was able to locate the boat for several weeks after the phones were turned off, and it was in late August when the U.S. Coast Guard finally sent a distress bulletin to all ships within a 1,000-mile radius of Tahiti. So, a month and a half later, right in the nick of time. Then on September the 5th, a man claiming to be Bison Dele tried to buy 461-ounce Gold Eagle coins from Certified Mint, a Phoenix-based gold dealer. On the first union check written in small, neat numbers was the amount of $152,096. Naturally, this raised eyebrows, and the bank notified Kevin Porter, Dele's business manager. The connection between Phoenix and French Polynesia is a world away, but the sequence of events between September 5th and July 6th help fill some gaps. On July the 8th, the same day that the satellite phones from the ship were turned off, a man matching Dabbard's description was spotted at the Pearl Resort on Moorea. Then 8 days later, on July the 16th, a damaged catamaran with bullet holes registered as the Aria Bella was seen making port into Phantom Bay in Tahiti. Anyone looking closely enough might have noticed the vinyl letters spelling the words Hakuna Matata removed from the boat's stern. And it would later come to light that Dabbard had docked the boat in the marina and left for Los Angeles, then Belize, and finally Arizona. But Porter had contacted Certified Mint and the Phoenix Police Department about the gold purchase, who apprehended Dabbard in Arizona. After 5 hours of questioning, Dabbard claimed he was buying the gold on behalf of his younger brother, who he said was alive and well in Tahiti. The police had no option but to release Dabbard since Dele could not be reached to disprove the account. Which, hearing it that way is so odd. Just to imagine the police are like, we think you killed your brother. And then that guy's like, nope, I didn't kill my brother. He's alive. Just ask him. And the police are like, well, we can't do that, so you're free to go. Dabbard then, as innocent people do, fled to Mexico, where he seemed to disappear, but the FBI was now on his trail. His mother received a phone call from Dabbard, who told her that he would never hurt Dele, but that he could not survive in prison, hence why he had to run. Again, perfectly normal behavior from an innocent man. By this point, the damaged boat had been found by local authorities. The joint investigation from the FBI and French government revealed that there was no sign of the passengers on the boat. They believed that Dele, Serena, and Saldo, the boat's captain, were dead. Evidence from the FBI showed that Dabbard had purchased almost $200 worth of weights from the Rebel Sports Store in Auckland, New Zealand. He is suspected to have used the weights to weigh down the bodies of the 3 other passengers somewhere out at sea. Which I understand, first-degree murder is all about, the intent to murder, the intent behind the planning of it and stuff like that. But just the mental image of buying 200 pounds of weights for your brother and his girlfriend so that after you murder them, you can throw their bodies out at sea. It's just diabolical. On September the 13th, Dabbard was found unconscious on a beach in Tijuana and brought to Scripps Memorial Hospital in Chula Vista, California. He was unresponsive, and according to the hospital records, it was suggested based on his physical condition that he had not been moving for a significant period of time. And eventually, on September the 26th, 13 days later, Dabbard was taken off life support. He was pronounced dead the following day. The official diagnosis was suicide by hypoglycemic brain damage, with subsequent discontinuation of life support. In summary, he overdosed on insulin and lay down on the beach to die. The bodies of Serena Carlin, Bertrand Saldo, and Bison Dele were never found. We will likely never know the truth surrounding what exactly happened that day, due to Dabbard having never testified nor giving a statement to police. However, he did tell his girlfriend, Erica Weiss, his version of the story. So don't worry, the killer is going to tell us his version of events. I'm sure it's to be believed. Dele accidentally punched his girlfriend, Serena, in the face, causing her head to hit a steel davit, killing her instantly. Saldo, the boat's captain, wanted to report the death, but Dele became agitated and killed Saldo by striking him with a wrench, and then, in a rage, supposedly went after Dabbard, who was coincidentally holding a gun, and Dabbard shot his brother Dele out of self-defense. In fear that no one would believe him, he dumped the 3 bodies overboard and then sailed back to Tahiti, and then also ripped off the vinyl lettering of the boat and registered it as something else, and then also took 3 different flights to different countries, and then also fled to Mexico. Sadly, Dabbard's version of events is the only one that the FBI ever had on record, but forensically, it didn't add up, as you can imagine. If Dele had indeed hit Saldo in the head with a wrench, there would be a blood splatter, especially in the area where they supposedly fought, which had a ceiling. Among other things, including from a narrative and motive standpoint, Dabbard's version was dismissed. Instead, the FBI publicly put out a statement involving Dabbard, saying he was motivated to assume his brother's identity by killing everyone on board and then sinking their bodies out at sea. Also, not even addressing the absurdity of a scenario where someone is in a fight with you and is so mad that they punch and miss, but the punch is still strong enough that when it hits their girlfriend, she flies into a wall and dies. Even ignoring that, just the concept that you witness this series of hijinks happen to where you're the last man standing, and your first reaction is to steal your brother's identity and try to buy $150,000 worth of gold. It seems that as soon as Bison Dele was no longer supplying money from the NBA to his sickly brother, his brother decided to just kill him and the people around him to try to steal his money that he believed was rightfully his. Sadly, his brother took his own life, so he'll never face justice this side of eternity. But he also didn't get to live out a life full of gold and beach vacations in Mexico either, so I guess that's a plus. Bison Dele was 33 at the time of his disappearance and assumed murder. So the tragic cases of Phil Jordan, Sonny Dove, and Bison Dele are coincidental in nature, but serve as stark reminders on how fleeting life can be. Throughout history, indigenous groups have come to know this lesson all too well. Native Americans and their relationship with basketball is an important one, especially in regard to life on the reservation. In fact, res ball, short for reservation ball, is a unique style of basketball associated with natives at the high school level in the southwestern United States, where a majority of reservations are located. For Lindy Waters III, building his own legacy as a native NBA player means giving back to his community, evidenced by him being a guest speaker for several native youth groups, as well as hosting basketball camps through the state of Oklahoma. Whether or not he knows about the Pistons' curse for native players, Lindy recognizes those who came before him. When he played for the Warriors, his previous team before being traded to Detroit, he remarked that he's fueled every single day knowing that the times that he's playing in are so much easier than what his ancestors had experienced. Waters isn't focused on the water, but rather helping Detroit make a deep playoff run, and ultimately, maybe even an NBA title. It's also worth mentioning, if anyone is to break the water curse of the Detroit Pistons, it should be someone named Waters. And with that, we have the lore of the Detroit Pistons curse. So yeah, no conspiracy or supernatural happenings. One case was someone who was out on a raft and then had a drowning accident, another of a mechanical incident that happened with a bridge in New York City, and the third of a very tragic and brutal murder at the hands of a family member. 3 unconnected but very strange stories given the similarity of their ethnicity and the team they played for. I understand why this spurred a ton of urban legends and conspiracies online, even if it isn't that substantial in the end. But either way, I hope that you found this video interesting. I normally don't cover things related to sports, but it's a change of pace and we'll see how you all like it. And if you don't like it, well, I'll never do it again and I'm so sorry. More content all the way. We appreciate the support. Everyone who helped work on the video will be linked in the description as always. And that should do it for now, but I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed and we will see you in the next one. Bye!